Welcome to Third Floor Views, a production of Chesapeake Family Life, where we talk about health, education, and living with kids. I'm your host, Janet Jefferson. Today, we're continuing our environmental sustainability series on Third Floor Views. And today is Earth Day, but we've been honoring Earth Day all month long and all year long. All of our April episodes, though, are focusing on exciting local work that is being done in the environmental field. And today we're talking about citizen science. Joining us is Liana Vitali, naturalist for Anne Arundel County and steward and citizen science coordinator for Jug Bay. Thank you so much, Liana, for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
To our viewers, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to put those in the comment section and we'll get to those as we can. Okay, Liana, let's start from the very beginning. Citizen science, what does that mean? What is it and how does it work?
Sure. I think for many of us, when we think about the word science, we might start kind of breaking out into some cold sweats. Maybe we're thinking about like AP chemistry back in high school. We're kind of like getting a little bit of those feelings of imposter syndrome. Science can sometimes feel really unattainable. It could feel like it's only reserved for those who have 4, 6, 8-year degrees. And the truth is that citizen science is what makes science so very versatile to everyone in their everyday life. Citizen science here at Jug Bay takes many different forms. I know that we'll talk about that, but it doesn't involve anyone coming to the sanctuary with any background skills whatsoever. A scientist can be born from a background in the arts, in humanitarian studies, and any kind of background, you can become a citizen scientist. All it really requires is an interest in the natural world, at least the citizen science that we do here at Jug Bay, and really a love for furthering human understanding of natural phenomena and the world around us. And if you've got those two things, you're ready to go to become a citizen scientist in pretty much any sector of the industry that offers it.
Okay, so you don't have to know anything about science. You just have to be interested in the work that you're doing. How does it work? Like, what does it look like when you are a citizen scientist? And I know that there's a lot of different programs out there and there are a lot of different examples, and it's sort of like, well, what does science look like? So it's a really broad question, but I think it's hard for people to sort of be like, what, anybody can go in and collect data? How does this work? So maybe sort of to get to the answer to this question, what are some of the programs that you are currently running at Jug Bay that are citizen science programs? And to give us an idea, and then we can actually talk about like, okay, what are the people doing?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So at Jug Bay, we've been established for 36 years and we're about 40 minutes south of Annapolis, just to give a little bit of a geolocation point to where I'm kind of going at you live from right now. And so we have at any given time between like 6 and 12 citizen science programs happening simultaneously at the sanctuary. A lot of our programs have to do with birds, and I am a professed bird nerd. I never was one. I never thought I'd become one. The citizen science programs here have changed me completely to the dark side. But we have programs for lots of birds that have to do with our water birds. We have 2,000 acres of tidal marsh here at Jug Bay. So as you can imagine, we get amazing diversity and counts of water birds. So we have a few programs that are citizen science based that monitor data on our water birds. We have forest bird surveys that we use mist nets for, that I can get into a little more detail. It's really cool. We do owl surveys as well. We monitor bald eagle nests. And then we have bluebird boxes. We have 2 trails around our parks, and it's like just looking at baby birds all summer long, counting eggs, that kind of great stuff. We do programs for reptiles and amphibians, vernal pools or ephemeral pools. These are kind of very temporary pools that appear in our forests that are critical habitat to amphibians and other salamanders and frogs that have specific parts of the life cycle that require water. It's a great vernal pool program that we have here. Turtle telemetry, literally chasing turtles through the woods with telemetry units, trying to find them. We have insect programs. We do canopy studies in our trees to see what insects are in the canopies. We have a monarch tagging program here as well. And then if like plants and animals are not your thing, then water chemistry, we got you with that. We monitor our stream chemistry health. We send samples out to the Department of Natural Resources to get every month. We're monitoring the health of these, and it's all of those programs are all primarily led and conducted by citizen scientists, volunteers, essentially.
Wow, that's really impressive. So that's a really long list of different things. So I imagine the actual work can look really different, but could you just give us some examples of what some of these people are doing? So you mentioned like walking around to nests and counting eggs or baby birds. And then you mentioned, following turtles with a telemetry unit. Like, what does this really look like? Are people just like with clipboards writing numbers? Are they with like binoculars? And then you talked about mist nets, what are mist nets and all these crazy things. And what does it look like?
Yeah. Okay. So like a day in the life of a citizen scientist. So, I mean, there's no like hard and fast dress code. It's comfortable, and outdoors is all that we care about for that. So we see our typical citizen scientists, they're rolling up in their cars and they've got their hiking boots on, their old trusty boots. They've got, they're like nice, quick dry clothes, whatever they can have, and their hats on for sure, and their water bottles. But if you're, say, a Bluebird nest box monitor, like I like that project because I am not a morning person. I wish I was. I wish I could be like up with the dawn. But this is a great project for those who maybe like need the weekends to sleep in and recover a little bit. So the birds sleep in a little bit too. So 9 or 10 a.m. that program rolls out every week, beginning in April and going to the end of September. And you're just going on this little walk. There's about 15 boxes, and you go to each box, you do a little knock inside the door, see who's home, make sure if mom's on the nest, that she has a chance to kind of be annoyed and fly off for a second. So you can open up and peek inside ever so quickly to see what's going on in there. And every week we monitor their health, their growth. When we're getting close to them fledging, we stop monitoring that box altogether. So we give them a chance to become, into their next chapter of their lives. And this is like maybe, 90 minutes to 2 hours of volunteering to visit all 15 boxes. Now, on the flip side of that, if you are a participant in our Waterbird survey, you're here at dawn, like every other Thursday. For like the real diehards, they're here at dawn. And it's really great because our sanctuary doesn't open until 9 a.m. So it gives people, if you're volunteering, you get this extra special access to the sanctuary. And they have a walking protocol. So everyone has their binoculars or their scopes. Spotting scopes was like, beefed up binoculars with only like one lens in it. And they're out doing this count that's been happening for 32 years. They've been doing this every other week, a little bit of a break in COVID because COVID just messed everything up for all of us. But other than that, 32 years of walking the same path around the sanctuary, stopping the same stops and counting the same birds and the new birds and exciting birds arriving early, birds taking off late in the season. It's just that those are just like 2 vignettes into 2 of our programs, and they can get as, intense as you want it to be, or they can be just as calm and checking some bird nests out every week as you want them to be.
So you mentioned with the Bluebird study that it's running for a period of time. What is the commitment when you're signing up to a project? Does it really vary depending on the project? Like are there one-day projects that it's just like, I'm going to jump in and help out this way? Or is it always a weekly or regular commitment? What do you actually have to, what are you doing with that time?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have a range. I'd say the majority of the programs, because what we're trying to do with citizen science is it's not fluff science. This is really important data that our volunteers are collecting. And how we decide to run the programs here at Jug Bay is that we launch every season off with an intensive training where we take folks through a 4, maybe 6-hour training to really give them a nice immersion into the protocol so that they feel confident in what they're going to be collecting data-wise in their ID of certain species where that's required in the projects. And so in return for that investment in that training, most programs, we ask for a once-a-month commitment for these programs that last 4, 5, 6 months in length. A lot of times our folks get hooked. I mean, looking at baby bird boxes, even though we keep talking about bluebirds, but they're just so great. They're just bursting right now. Our boxes are just with their first clutch of babies. So they're on my mind and in my heart right now. The people tend to get pretty hooked on it. So then they want to come back more than one shift a month. But we find that that's pretty reasonable. A lot of our volunteers are working professionals. So they're doing their 40 hours a week. They're going home to their families. Some of these projects we can talk about where you can bring your family along for some of these projects, which is great for getting kids involved in science at a young age. So for most programs, we do request that once a month commitment, a little more if you can, but we do have a few one-off programs coming up. One of our big events, and we might talk a little bit more about this later, is a BioBlitz coming up. That's a 24-hour event. And we definitely need volunteers for that. It's going to be the last weekend of June, like the 25th, 26th. We've locked in all of our experts. I'm super excited about this list of experts that we have in each of the major categories of wildlife and plants and fungus. And then we need volunteers to go out with the experts during certain shifts and find as many of that particular category of animals, plants, or fungus that they can. And that's just a 24-hour period. And then in July or August, we're going to have it's called an SAV Watchathon, and SAV stands for Submerged Aquatic Vegetation, essentially just underwater plants. And they're so important, right, to the health of the bay and to our waterways. And so for one day, we're doing a big count, and then hopefully we can just do it every single year and just have a really good baseline that we can build upon, but not require a hefty commitment from our volunteers and citizen scientists to gather that data.
So it's really a range. The programs can look really different and can fit different people's needs. So if one person is like, oh my gosh, I really want to participate, but I maybe can't do it every month or every week, it sounds like there are other spots that they could jump in and participate. What does sort of your average volunteer look like? You mentioned that maybe families could come along and that there might be some opportunities for kids to participate, and then you mentioned, weekends, but then also Thursday mornings. It sounds like it doesn't have to be someone who's retired that's participating. It sounds like maybe there's something for everyone depending on the program. Is that right?
Yeah, and we really do intentionally try hard to develop programs that have a spectrum of schedule so that we're trying to diminish the limiting variables, right, for getting people to become involved here at the sanctuary. We understand, or at least we all kind of feel here, all the staff, that the more people that we can engage with and love our sanctuary, the better chance our sanctuary has to continue thriving and growing into the future. Our small staff of 8 here, and we can love the sanctuary to death, every day that we're here working, but that love is multiplied when we're able to involve others into our family, our work family, our friend family, our volunteer family. And so our youngest volunteer currently for citizen science is 20, I think, 19 or 20. And our eldest, our wisest, I'll say, is 82. So our 82-year-old volunteer has been here for over 30 years and has been running some of our best citizen science programs. So, there's a 60-year range in ages there that we welcome. It's great for younger folks who are looking to diversify their portfolios when they're looking to apply to grad school or maybe get their PhD. You're finding folks who are retired and then they have that time, and we're very grateful for them to think about investing that at the sanctuary. And then in the middle, we have, and I'm laughing because we have a lot of our families, our parents and guardians who sometimes use our programs for a nice little break for some me time, and they can come out and they can just be a child again. They don't have to worry about bills and mortgages and, life insurance policies. They just have to dip a net into a vernal pool and count the baby salamanders in it. And I don't know what says sanctuary more, especially in the world today, than that. And so some of our programs are great for families. The BioBlitz is great for families. The Bluebird box monitoring, we do have a family that is participating this year. We've had families participate in our vernal pool study. And then what's great about our programs here too is that anyone who's interested in learning about the programs can just submit a group program request. Even just families can. And if they want to try out Bluebird box monitoring or vernal pools or stream chemistry, then one of the naturalists can take them out, even for like a special day. And they can, get to kind of understand what we're doing here, learn about it. And then when they're ready to, then they can join our program and become a volunteer.
That's great. I love the idea of a trial run. So let's say you have someone who says, yes, I'm really interested in citizen science. I want to volunteer at Jug Bay. How do you connect them to the different programs? Is it by interest, by schedule? Does it totally depend? Do you have sort of like a set system that you run people through? How do you match people to programs?
Yeah, yeah. So our website, it's jugbay.org, has a calendar on it. And on that calendar, we put all of our upcoming trainings. Um, we run things a little linear here where, we have a big training coming up, we advertise for it, a big vernal pool training, a big turtle telemetry training. We know how many spaces that we have available. You can oversaturate a program. You can have too many people. So we try to find that sweet spot where everyone has a helpful and intentional and meaningful role and feels that they're valued and needed, rather than standing around and just kind of being an observer. And so we run things that way. But if folks were to reach out to me and say, I missed the turtle telemetry workshop and I'm so interested in turtles, we set up different opportunities for folks to audit the programs. And so even though our schedule for vernal pools is done through the end of May, if someone reaches out to me and says that they just have always wanted to, pull up their hip, waders and go in and see what we do for that, then I'll work with them to find a date to come audit or observe that and see how they feel about it. Do they really like it? And then they'll be on our newsletter or on our watch list, and we can reach out next year when we have space available and we do another training. Any of our programs that we have, people can do that. And some are drop-in programs. The every other week Waterbird survey on Thursday morning, that's a drop-in. Stream chemistry, that's a drop-in program. You can come in anytime and participate in those.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really good to know. It sounds like there's so much flexibility in finding people and matching them to programs.
Right.
Well, you talked a lot about the bluebirds because they are so cute, but in general, what kind of data are people collecting? And then how do you use what you collect? Where does it go and what do you do with it?
Absolutely. Our biggest dream is that every piece of data that we collect, we can funnel into a national or international database so that the work that we're doing here is usable and applicable to researchers and scientists' efforts on a broader level. And so, for example, when we are working, I mentioned mist netting, which is, I understand this is definitely a sciencey kind of term, but essentially it's raising these really hard to see black nets in the middle of our forests. That when birds are flying through, they can temporarily get a little bit caught up in them, just enough time for us to pull them out, identify them, maybe give them a little bit of a bracelet, a bird band, and let them go. We've been doing that here in a program called MAPS. And it's a mouthful of an acronym: Monitoring Avian Productivity and Survivability. So if we have a spectrum of citizen science where it gets the most complicated to the easiest, MAPS is a very high level mist netting protocol that happens across the country. And we've been doing ours here almost continuously, one of the top 10 longest mist netting programs through this protocol for about 13 years. Wow. And it's run by an organization. The protocol it's called the Institute for Bird Populations. And so every year when we conduct our MAPS study, all of our data gets put into this national and international database that's used by many, many people to understand wildlife trends across the country and across the world. Our every other week survey, the Waterbird survey, we're doing a richness and an abundance study. So we're not only just checking the diversity, how many different species we're seeing, but we're counting the numbers that we're seeing, which is really helpful. You can do these diversity indices on those kind of information that you get. You can understand which parts of the marsh are attracting a greater diversity of birds than other areas. And then all that information gets sent into eBird, which is a platform from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And so then that information is all available to a broader audience. Bluebirds go into Project Nest Watch from Cornell Lab of Ornithology. Our monarch tagging, when we're tagging monarch butterflies in the fall on their way down to Mexico, that data goes all into Monarch Watch. That's a nonprofit monitoring monarch populations. So wherever possible, we are plugging this data into greater data sets, and it just elevates. We have the work that we're doing here at the sanctuary to help us in a hyper local level, but then to release that information to inform broad studies in a greater audience, that just really makes the data powerful that we're collecting.
What are some of the successes or benefits of citizen science?
Well, it is that, many hands make light work. So as I mentioned, we have the 8 staff at the sanctuary. There's no way we would be able to conduct the kind of research that we are conducting here just with the staff alone. We have 1,700 acres. And besides science and research, we also do stewardship and education. So we're doing field trips and we're cleaning out invasive species and doing trash cleanups. There's just way too much to do for a small staff. So we have over 200 active volunteers at any given time at the sanctuary. And last year, when we added up their numbers, I think that we were over 4,000 hours were donated to the sanctuary in 2021 by our volunteers, which is the equivalent of almost 2 full-time employees in a year. Like, that's crazy to have all that
really
help.
impressive.
Yeah. So the benefits, one huge benefit is just having all of these people that care so much and want to dedicate themselves to what we're doing here. We also have a wide ranging background. So we have folks that are coming in, we have retired Navy cryptologists. We have a gentleman who worked for NOAA releasing weather balloons on all 7 continents. We have child psychologists. We have bakers. We have, like, you name it. We have someone here, photographers. And what our volunteers bring with them is not just their passion and their dedication, but their life history and experience. They have ways that they offer input and suggestion and advice to improve and enhance our programs. They're just, to have such a wealth of knowledge in the volunteers that we have is such an asset to what we do here. I can't, overstate it enough. That's definitely like the big things. The challenge is that, obviously the volunteers are unpaid. So that is a terrible limitation. I wish we could pay them all. We do quite a few events here to help our volunteers feel appreciated. Volunteer socials, potluck lunches, swag, whenever we can give them t-shirts. This t-shirt I'm wearing is one that we've given out to our volunteers and citizen scientists. We're relying on their generosity. We're relying on their commitment. We're relying on them to show up when they say they're going to show up every week. I'm not out there chasing turtles or dipping for salamanders. I'm kind of like the wizard behind the curtain that's just making the shifts and schedules and training everybody up. And then I just kind of like, go please and have fun and get good data while you're at it.
Right. So you have so many of these citizen science programs running at different times in the year. Are there certain programs that work best for citizen science? And are there other programs that maybe aren't well suited for citizen science?
So we have a couple programs that we do here that are kind of very intense field work. And our superintendent of the park here, her name is Dr. Patricia Delgado. She's a wetland ecologist. And while we're managing the citizen science research projects, she has 2 to 3, I guess what I'll call hard science projects that are happening out in our marshes and in our forests that are extremely strict protocols that have been followed. They're the kind of protocols that the same person has to be collecting the data, because even a variable in the difference between how different individuals collect or measuring something can greatly impact the data in the long term. And so while we have this, this nice variety of citizen science programs, we do have quite a few of the harder science programs that you definitely need to have the advantage of an 8-year background when you're going to then create documents, white papers, publications that have trends in them that are making kind of like pretty big announcements to the science community about what we're seeing with surface elevations changes in our marshes and the rising differences in salinity levels. I mean, this is big, important information, but it involves many hours in high tide, in hot waders, and in the middle of the summer, snorkeling for seagrass. Like, it is not for the faint of heart. And so we try to reserve those programs for those of us getting paid to do them. And then we save the more fun programs for our volunteers, who I think also really appreciate that. But we do, one thing to say about that is when we see volunteers who are really committed, they've been coming back year after year, my boss will take them out to get a taste of these kind of more rigorous scientific programs. And a lot of times we'll see her turning to these folks over time to be like, hey, we're gonna go back out to do our marsh work today. You wanna come? And it kind of gives a little bit of a heightened and elevated science experience for our volunteers who just really show that they're dedicated to collecting good data and understanding the sanctuary.
That makes sense, that there are certain programs that certain research that's just not not quite appropriate for volunteers, if you're really looking at keeping variables limited, and if you're also looking at very precise work that needs a high amount of training or skill. But
Yeah.
it sounds like there's so much work to be done that's not necessarily needed, and there's a lot of space for citizen science to really fill a big gap.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the discoveries that you've made. Are there any exciting things that your research, and by your, I mean all of the citizen science that's being done at Jug Bay, what are you finding with some of these projects? What are you learning?
Yes. Yeah. That's a great question. So we have, I can think of a couple that really kind of blew me away was I was learning about our discoveries in these programs. So that MAPS program, that mist netting program, that's been going on for over 13 years. So we have this adorable little bird here. It's called a red-eyed vireo, and it's got this like wonderful sable colored feathers, but then these like beautiful bright red eyes. And it's a pretty common bird that we'll see. It's a interior forest dwelling species bird. So it likes to be in the woodland, not so much on like the wood line next to meadows and into the marsh. And so it was first, we had this one individual that we caught in 2003 in June 2003, and, did the standard procedure, gave it a little bracelet, a little bird band, took the information down. And this is a bird that is like the weight in your hand of like a quarter and 2 dimes, like super light bird. And it flies 3,000 miles south every single year to South America and comes back like to the same area, 3,000 miles again. So this bird, we thought that like red-eyed vireos maybe live for 7, 8, or so years in the wild. So this exact bird that was banded in 2003 was found again in May of 2013.
Oh, wow.
And it estimated to be about 10 and a half years old, which actually blew the record out of the water that anyone had. It set the North American longevity record, age longevity for the species.
Whoa.
And that was done here at Jug Bay. I know. It's just like these little things that are just big. They're big stories and big implications, because it helps us understand like these birds are making these huge trips. The energy that they need to make those trips is critical. Maintaining our insect populations and our seed-bearing fruits and plants populations are so important if these birds are living to be a decade or more older. Turtle telemetry, a cool story about that is we do box turtle telemetry here. We've been monitoring our box turtles for 25 years, and it's one of the longest running box turtle studies on the East Coast of America. Oh my gosh, it's just so cute. Our turtle team, I call them like the turtle team. One year they were like, you know what? I wonder what our mud turtles are doing. Mud turtles are much smaller than box turtles. They have a cute little dome shell, and they spend a lot of time in the water, but then also on land. And so some of the turtle team folks were like, let's slap a radio, a transmitter on one of these guys, a couple of these guys, and see where they go. Well, one day they couldn't find one of the turtles, the mud turtles. And so they're on the land, they're picking up like a really weak signal out in the marsh. They get on the boat, they go out into the marsh, they're like listening. I'm like pretending I'm holding the antenna and like listening to like the beep, beep, beep of where they're going to find the pinging back of that transmitter. And they end up beneath an osprey platform. And it's like blaring, the signal's just going like, bananas. And so they like reach down in the water and they pull up the turtle, and it had perished. It was no longer with us, but it still had the transmitter going. And the team at the time, it had like peck marks in the shell. So we think that the osprey, and it was during osprey season when they were there, we think that the osprey like caught the turtle and ate it, which I hardly ever do with turtles. So it was like a thing, like we always see osprey fishing for fish. We hear this little turtle, happened to be a turtle that had our little transmitter on it. We followed it all the way to an osprey platform.
That's
which is crazy.
Nothing like when your research subject is eaten.
Well, I know. I mean, I'm telling you, that's like the only other thing about citizen science is sometimes it's not for the faint of heart. Right, so like nature can be brutal sometimes. And so, I mean, one time we found a big black rat snake in a Bluebird box nest that gobbled up some eggs that were just laid. Oh, it scared the daylights out of me, even though I love snakes, but it scared it just to go in and see this curled up black snake in there. And I was like, oh, snakes got to eat too. But the last thing I would share that was really cool is we just started this year really honing in on a salamander road crossing program. And so, yeah, our spotted salamanders, all spotted salamanders have like a big migration, they call it. And that's every spring when the temperature's just right, the rains are just right, they get triggered to leave the forest and migrate to those temporary pools in the woods so that they can lay their eggs and their young can grow in there and become adults. But sometimes they have to cross the roads. So if you're ever driving down roads right now, especially now in the spring, and you hear for a minute as you whiz by, that the spring keepers might be calling out the side of your car door, you passing like a wetland or a pond or a pool, there's probably salamander egg masses in there. And the salamanders had to cross over the road to get there. So our volunteers for vernal pools took it upon themselves to become spotted salamander shepherds. And they watched the weather and they picked the right days and they went out on 2 migration nights. They checked almost every night actually, but migration happened over 2 nights. And they successfully helped 37 spotted salamander cross the road.
Wow.
Before getting possibly smushed by a car. They lost 2 salamanders they couldn't get to in time, but 37 were ushered across safely so that they could have their babies and start their life cycle.
That is incredible. I have 2 more questions for you, Liana, before I let you go. So you had mentioned the upcoming BioBlitz in June as an opportunity to sort of jump into citizen science and try it out. Are there any other events that people should know about that are coming up soon that would be useful to know?
Yeah, yes. So soon we'll be adding to our calendar. I think it's going to be in July. It's that SAV Watchathon. It involves paddling. Yeah, it involves paddling out into our marsh. We'll have canoes, kayaks, and stand-up paddleboards available. And we'll have some folks that go out with it. Yeah, it'll be really cool. And for those kind of events, we like to try to get some food too, so we can feed our volunteers who are out there helping us with these big kind of like one-off counts. And then coming up in September, we will do our training for our monarch tagging. And I know that sometimes like some folks can get a little bit nervous thinking, what does it mean to tag a monarch butterfly? So we teach you how to safely catch monarchs using butterfly nets and how to safely handle them. And we literally put a little sticker on their wings, give it a little tiny pinch so that it's on there tight. It doesn't impact their flight, doesn't impact them at all. And then they continue on their way to Mexico where hopefully they will continue their life cycle. So we'll have that training in September. And then if anyone's just raring to go and they want to come to Jug Bay, then check out Stream Chemistry once a month on our calendar and the Waterbird survey every other Thursday. That'll get you in, gives you a little bit, a taste of our citizen science programs. And hopefully you'll be hooked. And then
Definitely.
we can get you to be part of the family here.
My last question is for, do you have any resources that you would suggest for listeners who maybe aren't super close to Jug Bay? Are there places to go and connect with different citizen science projects throughout the region?
Sure. So I'd be willing to bet that, within any 30-minute radius of where your listeners might be tuning in from, there's probably a nature center, a sanctuary, or an Audubon chapter, or a meetup group online on the meetup group. Sometimes they have these listings as well. And I will guarantee you that there's some staff member there that is just dying to do monarch watch or to do some turtle work or some bluebird boxes, but they just need the manpower to do it, or they might already have established programs and they're looking for folks to come join them. That would definitely be my first thing that I would recommend. I'm not on Facebook, but I know that there are a few good resources on there. If you're in the national capital area, there's a great Facebook page called Capital Naturalist, and it's a fantastic way to kind of hear what's coming up, what's great announcements on upcoming programs. And some of your folks tuning in might know about this Chesapeake Network. It's a wonderful online database that anyone can become a member of and receive a daily or weekly digest of upcoming events and programs. We list all of our citizen science trainings on Chesapeake Network, and that goes out to the entire Chesapeake Bay watershed. So it's available to people in all different areas.
That's really helpful. Well, thank you so much to Liana Vitali for joining us today and talking about a citizen science, specifically citizen science at Jug Bay. Thank you also to all of our viewers and listeners for joining today. Make sure that you visit chesapeakefamily.com for local, up-to-date information on home, health, and living for today's Maryland parent. This episode will be archived on chesapeakefamily.com in both video and podcast format. Make sure that you join us next week as we continue our sustainability series, and we will be talking about how to make a butterfly garden with some of our local experts. I'm Janet Jefferson with Chesapeake Family Life and Third Floor Views. Thank you so much.